what if the reason you might be experiencing just like severe, debilitating physical pain during intimacy, what if it has absolutely nothing to do with your reproductive organs
Right.
and everything to do with how you were breathing when you were answering some stressful email at like 2 o'clock this afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds almost completely absurd on the surface, doesn't it?
Totally.
But the medical literature actually draws this direct, literal mechanical line between our respiratory system and the muscles that control our most intimate functions.
It's wild. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are tackling a massive stack of medical sources today. We've got clinical guidelines from the NHS, the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic.
A lot of heavy hitters.
Yeah, exactly, and some specialized physical therapy clinics, too.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to really unpack this hidden connection. We want to figure out how stress, our breathing patterns, and pelvic floor dysfunction all sort of collide.
Right. To create this condition where physical intimacy feels like, well, as one patient in the sources actually described it, like hitting a wall.
Just awful. And to put this into perspective for you, the listener, we really have to look at the sheer scale of the issue here. Right?
Oh, absolutely. The numbers are staggering. I mean, dyspareunia, which is the medical term for painful sex, it's going to affect between 20% to 50% of women in their lifetime.
Wow.
And about 1% to 5% of men, too.
That is, there's a massive portion of the population.
It is, but yet it remains one of the most heavily stigmatized conditions in modern medicine.
Right, because people are just suffering in total silence.
Exactly.
And I feel like a big part of that silence comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of our body's mechanics. Because, we usually think of breathing as this ultimate background process.
Yeah, sure. It's just automatic.
Right. You don't have to sit there and remind your lungs to pull in oxygen. But as we dig into these clinical guidelines, this really simple invisible reflex becomes the lead suspect in a very real medical mystery.
Yeah, and to understand the why of it all, we really have to completely rethink the anatomy of our core.
Okay, lay it on us.
Well, we need to stop picturing the core as just like a flat set of abs you'd see on some fitness influencer on Instagram.
Like the six-pack.
Right. We have to start visualizing it as a dynamic three-dimensional system. And the foundational piece of that system is the pelvic floor itself.
Which is essentially like a hidden hammock.
Yes, exactly. Picture this complex, interwoven network of muscles, ligaments, and connective tissue. And it stretches horizontally from your pubic bone at the front all the way back to your tailbone.
So there's basically the floor of your entire torso.
Literally forming the base, yeah.
And according to the sources, this hammock is working incredibly hard for you every single day. Like, let's break down its responsibilities, because it's not just sitting there doing nothing.
Oh, no, it has 4 major jobs.
First is continence,
Yeah.
right? It's the gatekeeper.
Yes, it literally keeps your bladder and bowels closed so you don't leak when you cough or, laugh or jump.
Crucial job. And then the second function,
It's fighting gravity all day long. It actually supports your pelvic organs. So the bladder, the uterus, the bowels.
is holding them up.
Yeah, imagine holding a water balloon in a small net for decades. That net has to be incredibly resilient.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. Then you have the third job, which is coordinating with your deep abdominal and back muscles to maintain your posture.
Right. It's the literal foundation of the house.
And finally, the fourth function, which is what we're really talking about today, it plays a massive central role in sexual function, arousal, and sensation.
Exactly. And when this hammock is functioning perfectly, it's dynamic.
Meaning it moves.
Right. It contracts and stiffens when you need to, like lift something heavy, but then it also relaxes and yields when you need it to open.
But the condition we are examining today, which drives so much of this unexplained pain, is called a hypertonic pelvic floor.
Yes. And hypertonic just simply means overactive or chronically tight.
So the muscles are locked in a persistent state of spasm.
Exactly. They are clenched up, and they've basically forgotten how to fully relax.
And the symptoms described in these physical therapy clinics, they're intense. Patients report this severe burning sensation or a feeling like being stabbed in the vagina.
It's horrific. And it doesn't just affect intimacy either.
Right, because the sources mentioned it can cause severe urinary urgency, where you feel like you have to sprint to the bathroom just in case, like over and over again.
Or even chronic constipation, simply because the muscles just refuse to open the door to let things pass.
Just locked shut.
Yeah. The muscle tissue becomes utterly exhausted from being constantly engaged. It's the equivalent of walking around all day with your bicep tightly curled up to your shoulder.
Oh, wow. Yeah, eventually that bicep is going to ache.
It's going to burn. And if you try to use it to lift something, it's going to fail because it has literally no range of motion left.
But wait, this actually brings up a massive contradiction that I think we need to clear up right away.
Okay, sure.
Because in popular culture, the generic advice for literally any pelvic floor issue is to strengthen it, right?
Right, do your Kegels.
Exactly. Do more Kegels, squeeze at the stoplight, squeeze in line at the grocery store. Are you saying that advice is wrong?
I am saying that for these specific patients, that generic advice is actually one of the most dangerous misconceptions out there.
Wait, really?
Dangerous? Absolutely. If your pelvic floor is hypertonic, if it is already locked in a tight, shortened, spasming position doing, Kegels will actively make your pain worse.
No, because it'd be like taking that clenched bicep we just talked about and trying to force it to do heavy dumbbell curls.
Exactly. You're just punishing a muscle that is already screaming for a break.
That makes so much sense.
And the tragedy here is how this feels to the patient. Because a chronically tight muscle actually presents as weakness.
How so?
Because the muscle is already fully contracted, right? So it cannot generate any more force on demand.
Oh, I see.
So a patient might cough, leak a little urine because the muscle can't contract any further to stop it, and think, oh, my pelvic floor is weak, I need to do 100 Kegels a day.
And they're just making it so much worse.
Yes, and the research from the Mayo Clinic highlights just how pervasive this is. They estimate that among women with chronic pelvic pain, a staggering 60% to 90% have tight, overactive pelvic floors.
60 to 90%.
Yeah. Strengthening exercises are entirely contraindicated for them.
Okay, that makes perfect mechanical sense. But it begs a much bigger question.
Which is?
Well, muscles don't just clench themselves for years on end without a boss telling them to do so, right? If the tissue itself is just muscle fiber, what is sending the signal to keep the hammock locked up tight?
That's the million-dollar question. And to find the boss, we have to look away from the physical anatomy of the pelvis, and we have to look directly at the nervous system.
Okay.
The clinical sources point to this incredibly powerful, often subconscious link between our emotional state, our past experiences, and physical guarding.
Physical guarding, like bracing yourself.
Right. Stress, anxiety, or a history of trauma causes the body to physically armor itself.
And trauma in this context is a really broad spectrum based on what we read. The sources mention it could be a difficult childbirth, an invasive pelvic surgery, or, a history of sexual abuse.
Yes. The brain remembers that these events happened in this specific area of the body.
And it creates what the pain science literature calls a pain fear cycle, right?
Exactly. Because your brain's primary biological imperative is to protect you from harm.
Right, keep you alive.
Yeah. If you touch a hot stove, you instantly yank your hand away and your brain logs that information. You will never touch that stove again without hesitation.
Okay, so let's apply that mechanism to intimacy. Let's say penetration has hurt in the past, and maybe it was due to a highly treatable temporary issue, like a bad urinary tract infection, or temporary menopausal dryness, or just an inflammatory flare-up from endometriosis.
Right, something entirely physical and temporary.
The brain logs that physical pain. So, the next time intimacy is initiated, what does the brain do? It anticipates the pain before it even happens.
Exactly. And that anticipation triggers the sympathetic nervous system.
The fight or flight response.
Yes. Subconsciously, well, before you can rationalize it, your brain sends a lightning-fast signal to clamp down those pelvic floor muscles to build a shield.
Wow.
But because the muscles clamp down so aggressively, they create a physical barrier, which makes penetration nearly impossible, and that inadvertently validates the brain's fear by causing even more pain.
It just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Completely.
And reading through the NHS Lothian source, they have this brilliant way of capturing this neural sensitization. They call it an oversensitive car alarm.
It's a great analogy.
It is. But honestly, for me, it feels more like one of those hypersensitive motion sensor security lights on a driveway.
Oh, yeah. How do you mean?
Well, it's supposed to turn on when a burglar approaches, right?
Yeah.
But eventually, the wiring gets so glitchy that it starts blinding you every time a single leaf blows across the pavement.
That is a perfect way to look at it. The threat isn't real anymore, but the system's reaction is at maximum capacity.
The nervous system just becomes hypervigilant.
Yeah, and it can literally store pain as a physical memory. It reproduces the muscular spasm even when the original biological trigger, like that UTI or the temporary infection, has been cured for years.
So the body is desperately trying to keep you safe, but the alarm system's calibration is just completely broken.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have the muscle, which is exhausted. We have the brain, which is terrified and sending out false alarms. But here is where we get to the real core focus of today's deep dive.
The mechanical link.
Right. How does that stress signal physically translate into a locked pelvic floor? What is the actual lever pulling the strings here? Because this is where the breathing comes in.
Yes, this is the fascinating part. We need to bring back that three-dimensional cylinder analogy of the human trunk.
The core.
Right. Picture a soda can. The diaphragm, which is this massive dome-shaped breathing muscle separating your chest from your abdomen, is the top of the can.
Okay.
The abdominal and spinal muscles make up the rigid walls of the can, and the pelvic floor is the bottom.
So under normal, relaxed conditions, the top and the bottom act like a mirror to each other.
Right.
So they kind of dance in perfect synchronization.
Exactly. When you take a deep, relaxed breath in, your lungs fill with air and your diaphragm flattens and pushes firmly downwards.
And because your internal organs are basically a bunch of water balloons, they have to go somewhere.
Right, they get pushed down too. And this gently presses on the pelvic floor, causing it to naturally yield, drop, and lengthen.
So cool. And then when you exhale, the diaphragm recoils and lifts back up into the chest cavity.
And the pelvic floor naturally recoils and lifts right back up with it.
So every single breath you take is supposed to be this synchronized, automatic massage for your internal organs and your pelvic muscles.
That is exactly how it's designed to work.
But when we encounter stress, that beautiful dance gets completely destroyed.
It does. We go into fight or flight mode, and our breathing pattern fundamentally changes.
We start taking shallow, rapid breaths using only the top of our chest.
Yes, or worse, and I see this all the time, we habitually hold our breath when we're focused or anxious.
Oh man, I catch myself doing this constantly. So if I'm holding my breath while trying to hit a deadline, my pelvic floor is literally trapped in a clenched position.
Yes. The clinical term for this connection is the viscerosomatic reflex.
The viscerosomatic reflex.
Right. And chronic breath holding is the mechanical lock that maintains that pelvic tension. Because you are only breathing into your upper chest, your diaphragm never fully descends.
And because the diaphragm never drops.
The internal pressure never increases, and the pelvic floor is robbed of its natural mechanical cue to relax and stretch.
Wow. It never gets that downward push.
Exactly. It just stays suspended in an upward, tight defensive posture hour after hour.
Whoa, hold on. Let's dig into that term you just used, viscerosomatic reflex. Let's translate that for me and the listener, because that sounds like the exact missing link we need to understand here. How does the organ-to-muscle connection actually create the pain?
Okay, so a viscerosomatic reflex is a neural loop. It's where stress or dysfunction in an internal organ, in this case the altered mechanics of the lungs and diaphragm, triggers a corresponding spasm in the surrounding skeletal muscles.
So when you chronically hold your breath, you cut off the natural range of motion of the pelvic floor.
Right, it starts expanding and contracting. And when a muscle is constantly contracted and never moves through its full range, local blood flow is severely restricted.
It's like crimping a garden hose.
Exactly. The blood just can't get to the tissue.
And blood carries oxygen.
Yes. And without adequate oxygen flushing through the tissue, the cellular metabolism changes. The muscle starts producing waste chemicals like lactic acid and inflammatory markers way faster than the restricted blood flow can clear them away.
So the tissue is essentially marinating in its own inflammatory waste.
That's a gross way to put it, but yes. And the buildup of these chemicals makes the local nerves incredibly hypersensitive.
Ah.
This is a crucial point in the research. The pain isn't just mechanical tightness. It is chemically induced hypersensitivity.
Wow.
So when physical intimacy occurs, that tissue isn't just stiff. The nerve endings are chemically inflamed. They fire off pain signals at the slightest touch.
Because the way you manage your breath during stress literally alters the chemical environment of your pelvic floor.
It really does.
That is genuinely mind-blowing. The shadow breathing pattern I use when I'm stressed at my desk at 2 p.m. is starving my pelvic floor of oxygen, building up inflammatory chemicals all afternoon, and setting the stage for excruciating pain at 10 p.m.
It highlights how chronic breath holding and paradoxical breathing, where your chest rises but your belly sucks in, they are not just bad habits. They are active contributors to chronic pain syndromes.
Okay, so if paradoxical stress-based chest breathing is the lock, diaphragmatic breathing has to be the key.
Yes.
We have to reverse engineer this. How do we break the cycle?
Well, the clinical sources refer to this rehabilitation process as down training.
Down training, because we mentioned earlier that Kegels are up training, like
Yeah.
teaching a muscle how to recruit fibers and contract.
Right, and down training is the exact opposite. It is the active, highly conscious process of teaching a spasming muscle how to yield, release, and let go.
And the absolute primary tool for down training is diaphragmatic breathing, often called belly breathing.
Yes.
The Torbay and South Devon NHS Foundation Trust provides a very specific step-by-step for this in their guidelines.
They do, yeah.
They suggest finding a relaxed position, maybe lying on your back with your knees bent and supported by pillows. You place your hands on your lower ribs or your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And as you inhale, slowly taking about 4 seconds, you should physically feel your stomach rise and push out against your hands. That is the physical proof that the diaphragm is finally dropping.
Exactly.
And you hold for a moment and exhale incredibly slowly for 5 to 8 seconds. But the critical rule is making sure your upper chest and shoulders stay completely still.
It sounds elementary on paper, right? But for someone whose nervous system is trapped in a sympathetic fight-or-flight state, it requires massive concentration.
I bet.
You are attempting to manually override your autonomic nervous system by consciously slowing your respiratory rate and forcing the diaphragm to engage. You are sending a biological signal up the vagus nerve to your brain.
You are commanding the brain to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode.
Right. You are manually reprogramming the glitchy motion sensor light.
You are forcing it to recognize that there is no burglar.
You are biologically proving to your brain that the environment is safe.
But here is the practical struggle for the listener trying to apply this, I think. How do you actually know if you're doing it right?
Right, because you can't see your pelvic floor.
Exactly. How do you know it's letting go and not just staying tight while your belly moves?
This is where the physical therapy clinics rely heavily on visualizations. The brain responds incredibly well to imagery when trying to control invisible internal muscles.
No, that makes sense.
So on that deep 4-second inhale as your belly rises, you can imagine your pelvic floor as a tightly closed rosebud.
Okay.
As the breath flows in and the diaphragm drops, visualize the petals softly opening and blooming outward. And then on the slow exhale, the petals gently draw back together without clenching.
I love that one. But I also read another analogy that might resonate if the flower imagery doesn't work for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Think about the physical sensation of unclenching your jaw. Like when you realize you've been grinding your teeth, you don't use a muscle to pull your jaw open, right? You just stop firing the tension and let gravity drop it a millimeter.
Yes, that is perfect.
It's that exact same feeling of yielding, but happening at the base of your pelvis. The clinical guides also mention imagining your sit bones, like the bony parts of your pelvis you feel when sitting on a hard bike seat, gently spreading apart on the inhale, making the whole pelvic bowl feel wider.
The clinical terminology for this yielding sensation is the reverse Kegel.
Reverse Kegel.
It is a deliberate dropping or lengthening. Some sources suggest checking your progress by observing the muscle internally or externally with a finger. But, and this is a massive warning, you are looking to feel the muscle soften and melt away from the pressure.
You are not actively pushing or bearing down like you're straining on the toilet.
Yes, the sources are very clear on that distinction. Straining just causes different problems. It's about yielding, not pushing.
But I want to push back on the timeline here.
Okay.
The Dynamic Health Physical Therapy Guides mention that this can take 6 to 8 weeks of daily practice to notice an improvement.
That feels like an eternity for someone in chronic pain, just to learn how to breathe again. Is that timeline really necessary?
It is, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
managing that expectation is crucial. You have to remember what you are up against here.
Right.
You aren't just stretching a tight muscle. You are untangling years, perhaps decades, of deeply ingrained neurological stress responses.
Oh, wow. It takes weeks for the nervous system to stop treating intimacy as a threat, for those inflammatory chemicals to flush out of the tissue, and for the brain's alarm system to actually recalibrate.
You are literally rewiring the software while the hardware is running.
Precisely. Regaining this mind-body connection isn't just a quick mechanical fix for pain-free intimacy. It is fundamentally about reclaiming conscious control over a nervous system that stress has hijacked.
You are using the breath to bridge the gap between the conscious mind and the unconscious protective reflexes of the body.
Absolutely.
So, to synthesize this entire journey for you, the listener, we've learned that when it comes to pelvic health, pain isn't always a symptom of weakness that needs to be strengthened.
Usually it's not.
Right. Very often, it is a glaring sign of trapped, exhausted tension.
Mm.
A hypertonic pelvic floor is like a clenched fist that has forgotten the physical command to open. And because of the incredible mechanical mirroring between our diaphragm and our pelvic floor, shifting our breath out of a panicked, shallow upper chest pattern and down into a deep, slow belly breath mechanically forces that pelvic hammock to drop.
And by restoring that downward mechanical movement, you restore the blood flow, clear out the inflammatory chemicals that make the nerves hypersensitive, and systematically convince the brain's oversensitive alarm system to finally power down.
Amazing. If you are listening to this and recognizing these symptoms in yourself or a partner, the most important takeaway from all these sources is that you are not broken.
Definitely not.
It is not all in your head, and you are certainly not alone. The clinical guidelines universally agree that pelvic floor physical therapy is the absolute gold standard for getting customized, hands-on help to assess and treat this exact issue.
It is a highly treatable condition, but only once you stop treating the symptoms and start addressing the mechanical and neurological root causes.
Which brings us to the deeper, broader implication of all this research, I think.
Yes. We learned today that the brain is capable of storing emotional trauma and chronic stress as a physical memory, locking it tightly into the musculature of the pelvic floor via our breathing patterns.
It really makes you hyper-aware of every shallow breath you take during a busy workday.
It should, but it also raises an incredible question for you to explore on your own.
What's that?
Well, if the pelvic floor can hold on to the memory of our past stresses through the breath, what about the rest of the body?
Oh, wow.
Right. Could this exact same viscerosomatic link between breath holding and muscle hypoxia explain other mysterious chronic pain conditions?
Like what?
Things like severe TMJ and jaw clenching, tension migraines, or even unexplained lower back pain. If altering our breathing can unlock trauma in the pelvis, could consciously changing our daily breathing patterns be the secret to rewriting the brain's memory of pain throughout the entire human body?